Hi guys, welcome back to Too Cool for Middle School. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 things that I learned in my teacher credential program and 5 things I did not. The inspiration for this video actually comes from a Samantha Ravindal video. She's from Battleash Beauty, and she did a video called 5 things I learned in makeup school and 5 things that I didn't. Honestly, the majority of the YouTube videos that I watch are makeup tutorials, and so I just was really intrigued by her video about makeup school, and I thought I would just take that idea and apply it to a teacher credential program. Now, one disclaimer, I live in California, and California likes to make everything complicated, and we have a different process for becoming a teacher than most states. So what we have to do is get our bachelor's degree, and then a teaching credential is a separate thing that you do afterward. And then if you want a master's, that's also a separate thing as well. Some programs I think combine like a credential program and a master's, but the way I did it was all completely separate. I've got quite a few videos that you can reference about my credential program and then the bits of program that follows and things like that I can list below. But yeah, for me it was bachelor's degree, teacher credential, and then master's. And I actually completed all 3 of those things at Cal State Fullerton, which is in Southern California near Disneyland, for those of you who are trying to picture California. Just for a timeline reference, I got my bachelor's in 2010, and then the 2010-2011 school year, that was when I did my credential. And then 2011 and 12, I was working in an after-school program. And then I got a part-time teaching job for 12-13, and then a full-time teaching job the next year, and it is currently the end of the 2017-18 school year, so I've just confused myself, but I think I've been teaching for like 6 years if you include my part-time year. So it's been a little while since I was in my credential program, so I figure I better make this video now before I forget everything. So let's see here. Let's start with the things that I did learn. So first of all, I learned a lot of great strategies. Like I said, in California, your bachelor's degree is just purely content related to whatever you're getting your degree in. So like if you're getting a degree in history, you just take all history classes. You don't really learn how to teach history. That's where the credential program comes in. So in my credential program, I really did learn a lot of great strategies and just the pedagogy and teaching skills that I didn't know about before. So many of these things seem really basic to me now, but I remember being so impressed by foldables. I remember a professor like teaching this whole lesson and showing us how you can use foldables to make like graphic organizers, actually graphic organizers too. That was something I learned in my credential program. Things like KWL charts. I remember I had a professor that had us make like a human timeline. I thought that was a cool strategy. Things like online scavenger hunts, jigsaw reading, strategies for group work, and like assigning different tasks to everybody to make sure that everyone has a job and everything gets done. So we had pedagogy classes where we learned all about that. I was in the credential program for a single subject social science credential. So everybody in my cohort wanted to be a history teacher or economics teacher or government or whatever. So most of the pedagogy that we were learning was specific to history and how you could create lessons that would deliver that content in particular. Learning specific tools for teaching history and helping students make sense of history, and learning like different ideas for projects, different ways of assessing history content besides just like a multiple choice test. Those were all of the things that I learned in my pedagogy classes, and I thought that was really, really useful. The second thing that I learned a lot about in my credential program was culturally responsive teaching. I can't remember now like what the name of the class was, but something like multicultural education or whatever, and those classes were excellent. That was one of the first classes that I took in my credential program, and I remember the professor was just great. He was a younger guy, he was an Asian man, and he knew his stuff. He knew his theory, and he did a great job of really making us think. And if you kind of picture like a group full of young adults that want to become teachers. You know, it's pretty common for a lot of us to kind of have like this white savior complex, and we've got these visions of becoming a teacher that are more rooted in movies than in reality. And I feel like he did a very good job of kind of gently opening our eyes to our preconceived notions and then showing us how it's not about us, it's about the students. And we read a lot. I remember that almost every book was by Sonia Nieto. We read a lot of, they would always just call it Fisher and Fry. Is it like Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry, I think. Anything by Sonia Nieto is definitely good if in your program you're not really getting as much of that as you wanted. We learned a lot about like the history of education and the way that culture and race have interacted, usually negatively, with education. We learned about things like code switching and different communication styles, and just the different backgrounds that a lot of our students would be coming from, and ways to interact positively with them and understand possibly, like, you know, the different communication styles that they might have, or different body language that might mean different things to different people. I remember talking about how, like, I think when I was growing up, I don't know if this is just in my imagination, but I feel like, you know, my parents would say, like, look at me when I'm talking to you, or, you know, your teachers, even as they were disciplining you, would say, look at me while I'm talking to you. And for some students, that would feel very disrespectful. Like, for them, respect would be looking down, kind of in deference. But teachers who don't understand that might see that as like defiance, when it really isn't. So just talking about things like that and going through different situations, I think was very, very useful and necessary for us. In Southern California, it's likely that you are going to have students from all over the world, from many different continents and many different backgrounds, who speak many different languages. And it is essential that you have the theory and the knowledge and the understanding and the compassion and the empathy and the self-reflection to be able to work with people from anywhere. So I felt like my program did a really good job of opening our eyes to that, and the power that we have as teachers, and the damage that we could possibly inflict if we did not understand these things. The third thing that we learned a lot about was standards-based lesson planning and like objectives-based lesson planning. I was going through my credential program right before the switch over to Common Core, so I had to work with our previous state standards, which in history we still use actually, but I had to work with those extensively. We also worked with like literacy standards, and so when I look back at my lesson plans, which I saved, and I would suggest doing that because this is the time when you do a really good job, in the future you know, shorten it up a little bit. But I look back at those lesson plans, and I always had an objective, like the SWABOT, like students will be able to, or like a SMART goal, you know, I forget what SMART stands for, but like specific, measurable, timely, or whatever. You're probably learning about that right now too. So we had to write everything in those formats. We always had to write in like a hook for our lesson and closure for our lesson. We would teach sample lessons in front of each other, and we always had to like demonstrate the objectives and the standard that it was based on, and just kind of, it was fairly formulaic for lesson planning, but when you're new, that's really good to do. And honestly, even once you have some experience, it's not a bad way to go. The fourth thing is kind of related to that. We learned a lot about ELD strategies and modifications or adaptations for any students in our classes who would need something like that. There are a lot of legal issues within teaching that you have to be aware of. You really have to know special ed law. You really have to know just the rights that students and parents have, and the things that you are legally bound to do. And we learned a lot about those things, and 504 plans and IEPs and any kind of legal documentation that requires you to do modifications or adaptations for your students. And honestly, those things are just good teaching when you are thinking about making sure that all of your students can access your lesson and access the curriculum, you know, no matter what their reading level, no matter what their math level, no matter what their home language is. If you are making sure that those students can access your lesson, all of your students are going to benefit from that. So it's never a waste of time to spend your time working on those like modifications or adaptations for just a few students or maybe even one student, because it will benefit the rest of your class when you look at your lesson critically that way. And most of the time, it's the law. The fifth thing that I would say I learned is just what kind of a teacher I wanted to be. And this was because of my master teachers. So the way that my credential program was set up was during the day for an entire school year, I did student teaching at a high school actually. I taught 10th grade world history and 11th grade US history. And then after school, that's when all of our classes were held, like from 4 to 7 or 7 to 10, a couple nights a week. And we had homework and projects and lesson plans to turn in and all of that. Plus I had to work in order to support myself. So I taught piano lessons on weekends and any afternoon when I didn't have to go to class. So anyway, that was like how my weeks were structured. But I got to student teach for an entire year. And so for the beginning of that school year, the first couple of months, I just did a lot of observing. I was in one teacher's classroom for a couple of periods and the other for the other periods. Whew. Sorry, I had to go change a diaper, so I kind of lost my train of thought. I think I was talking about my master teachers. Yes. So anyway, I got to spend a lot of time observing my master teachers and then working alongside them as I kind of gradually took over the classes. And I loved both of my master teachers. I'm just really glad that I got to watch the way that they like carried themselves and the way that they interacted with students and the authority that they brought into the classroom and the way that they taught their content. Even, just like how they put together field trips or how they prepared for state testing, just overall like how they moved through a school year. And I had so much respect for them. And when I kind of like think ahead to what kind of a teacher I want to be, or like what my goals are for my teaching in the next 5 years, next 10 years, I picture them and their confidence and their intelligence and just we used to call it with itness, like how you can just eventually who's on task, who's not, what you need to recover, what you can speed through, like you just kind of get this thing down, and that's how I want to be. Okay, 5 things that I did not learn in my credential program. The first and most glaringly obvious is classroom management. That was rarely spoken of, to be honest. Like we covered pedagogy quite a bit and content, but we were not really explicitly taught classroom management or even like theories of classroom management. And I'm so grateful for this YouTube community and Instagram community of teachers and all of the discussions that I have with like my peers about different kinds of classroom management. And it is absolutely essential, and it's easier in some ways than some people make it, but it's a lot more complex in other ways. So, this is like my 6th year of teaching. I think I started making YouTube videos like 4 years ago. One of my videos with the most views is like my behavior classroom management systems and like the power struggle between students and teachers. And honestly, even since I made those videos, I've done a lot of learning and reading and researching, and I kind of do things differently now. This is definitely a topic for a whole nother video or several videos, but I am a believer in restorative justice practices, and I think that having control and power over your class is a very fragile thing and something that you need to reflect on constantly, and you need to think deeply and for a long time about why you implement certain things and how your upbringing affected those ideas and what you think respect is and what you think defiance is and what subconscious biases you might have. And I think those would have all been amazing conversations to have in a credential program. And there's no one size fits all classroom management or school behavior or policy, but I think it would have been worthwhile to learn about some of the different ones and just talk about how those can be implemented with students. I'll definitely add more to this conversation later, but that was pretty much absent from my whole credential program. The next thing is technology. I used to always be afraid of technology and it intimidated me, and honestly, starting this YouTube channel has helped me so much. Now I can film and edit, and I am not great at any of these things, but in the past I would have thought that I'm not capable of doing any of these things. And just working with technology and education is such a good skill to have, just to be able to try new things, find out about new apps. I mean, something new comes out every single day, some new program, some new app, some different teaching tool, and you do really need to be able to like assess those things and figure out if they're going to be useful in your class. And I don't think we did much technology at all when I was doing my credential, but I can already, think like if I were teaching a class right now to credential students about technology, I would have each of them research a particular app or website or whatever, and then show it to the class and do a little presentation and talk about how you could use it in your class. I would have them all upload it to like a common site if we used like Google Classroom or whatever, and make those resources available to people. And we didn't do anything like that. I remember people talking a lot about wikis and like Web 2.0, but there was nothing like hands-on or practical. And I think if you want some kind of an edge in teaching, if you can be really comfortable with technology and not freak out when your school says they're gonna try some new app or try some new website or try some new attendance system or whatever, that will really give you an edge and make your life easier. The third thing that I didn't learn a ton about was parent communication, and I guess that's kind of a hard thing to teach when you're just in classes, but seriously, I feel like this would not be very hard to do. You could get a bunch of crazy parent emails from a bunch of different teachers, black out who it's actually from, and you could spend weeks just giving future teachers all of these examples of actual parent emails to teachers and have them gasp and be in shock, and then try to formulate a reply. Because there's almost no way to prepare you for some of the crazy emails that you will get from parents. You would be shocked at what they expect of you, what they are offended by, the things that upset them. I mean, of course there's the occasional nice email, but who writes an email just to be thankful? Not very many people. So usually when you get a parent email, it's because there's some kind of a problem. And this is people defending their kids, so a lot of times they go a little overboard, and it can be really difficult to figure out how to respond. So I really think there just needs to be an entire semester-long class where all you do is practice formulating responses to real-life parent emails. That wisdom, the wisdom to know how to respond to emails like that, is an essential skill for a teacher. The fourth thing is something I don't remember ever talking about in my credential classes, but I did a ton of summer sports camps as I was going through college, and my husband and I ran a bunch of like basketball camps, tournaments, and stuff like that. And one of the biggest things that I learned doing that is that you live and die by your transitions. And in these situations, I mostly worked with like younger kids. And so I can see how with an elementary school, like self-contained class, your transitions would be crucial. So when you're moving from, for us, it was like from the game to a water break, or from getting the pennies out to the field, those transitions are where you're gonna lose people, and where the kids are gonna start poking each other, somebody's gonna trip somebody, someone's gonna complain about something, someone's gonna wander off. You need to have like a game, or tell them to like walk in slow motion or walk like a elephant or something. You have to do something to keep kids engaged through transitions. So in middle and high school, it's those times when you're like passing out papers or taking roll or setting up a video that you're about to play. Those like dead times, that's when your behavior issues are gonna happen, or when just something weird is gonna happen. We were moving the chairs back together the other day, because I do restorative circles, community circles every Thursday, and like someone, I think 3 people just threw water bottles across the room, and one of them exploded all over the floor. It's like, why would you throw a water bottle across the room? And that's not going to happen in the middle of like me teaching. It's going to happen in a transition. So maybe that needs to be like a whole nother video as well. But yeah, learning strategies for keeping kids engaged through transition times, Very important. I'm sure there are definitely more than 5 things I didn't learn in my credential program, but the 5th one that I will mention in this video anyway is how to change things at your school that you would like to see changed, or how to deal with things that are never going to change. So this could be something very simple, like you need another student desk in your room or a chair. So you need to find out who to talk to about that, who to email, who to kiss up to, whatever it might be. Those kinds of things you're not really going to go over in your credential program. You just have to learn it at whatever school you're at. It could be something small like that. It could be something really big. You might see the need to implement an entirely different like behavior strategy across your school, or you might want to see like some other kind of policy for writing or something like that implemented in your school. And while, you know, there are people that have those jobs that are in charge of doing that kind of stuff, like administrators and curriculum designers or whatever, you're the one that has to live it. You're the one teaching in that school every single day, and you're gonna see things that you wish were different. No matter how great of a school you work at, I work at a great school right now, and there are still things that I can pinpoint and I would like to see change in those areas. But this takes a lot of wisdom on your part. You've got to figure out, is this worth bringing up? You don't want to seem like a complainer. You don't want to seem like you are negative or, you know, picking things apart. But is this a big enough deal that you need to bring it up? Is it going to come back later like, well, why did you never say anything about this if it was a problem? Who should you talk to about this? Are there certain teachers at your school that are trustworthy, or some that are just going to like use that against you later maybe? Are there some teachers that you know are just going to be flat out against this idea that you have? It's a surprisingly difficult thing to navigate. So you kind of have to figure out your alliances. You have to figure out whether it's worth like pushing for. You and your administration might have polar opposite views about whatever this issue is. There might be things that you need to make sure you have documented in emails. There might be like ed code laws or policies that you need to be aware of. Sometimes there are things that become like labor law issues or union issues. My husband teaches PE, and a lot of administrators don't know a whole lot about PE, but there are like federal laws and mandates regarding PE and minutes and stuff, so he's got to know a lot about that sometimes. So you've got to figure out, do you like join the committee that is in charge of making decisions about stuff like this? And then, you know, even if you're on that committee, are you able to make your case and bring research and remain positive and get people on your side? Or are there just some things that even though you disagree with the way that they're done, you just let it go and move on and still teach either way? You're probably going to have a lot of situations like that, and so that is just something that you need like personal leadership skills and personal communication skills in. So I wish you the best of luck with that. Anyway, those are my 5 things that I learned in my credential program, and 5 things that I did not, but I just had to learn through my journey as a teacher. I'm still learning about all of these things even as I go. So if you're a new teacher or a future teacher, I hope that this video was useful to you. Say hello in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe and notifications and all that good stuff. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.